Milt is loving and kind and interesting to be with. As a family person, as an entrepreneur, as an idea man, he is deliberate in all of his actions.
Milt has very high integrity. He's honest, hardworking, smart, detail-oriented.
I would say he's practical, he's purposeful, and he's very patient.
I have learned that Milt Kuyers is really the Energizer Bunny, because even at his age, he still runs, he still gets up early, he's busy every day doing something, and he just doesn't slow down.
Milt Kuyers and I were fellow students and friends at Calvin College. He was just a pleasant, friendly guy. I had no idea that he was going to become a big business leader, and I'm not sure he did.
When I was growing up, my horizons, having grown up in Jenison, were about as far as Lake Michigan was from Jenison and as about far east as Lowell. I'm very happy with the life that God gave me.
Milt was committed to his job, but that wasn't his life. Family and church were more important, I would say. But I think that's why he was successful in his business too.
When Milt comes into the plant, one of the first things he does is take his coat off, get a cup of coffee, and we sit and just chat and have a conversation, and he listens. And the other thing he likes to do, and we often will do, is go out on the floor and just talk to people. And by that process, he learns better how things are actually running.
He may not be the person who's doing most of the talking, but Milt is listening. He's a keen listener.
When I think of Milt and Carol Kuyers, they live to give. They live to bless others. And they have a heartbeat for generosity, for stewardship, for service, for the kingdom.
Milt looks at stewardship. I mean, you're a steward of these resources, so it doesn't much matter how much you've accumulated, it's what you've done with those resources.
You'll never understand Milt Kuyers unless you realize that in every area he felt that he was responding to the gifts and opportunities that God had given him.
The joy on their faces when they talk about the giving that they do. And it's giving from the heart. My mom and dad, when they're giving, they both feel like they're challenged by God. The more that God gives them, the more that they give back.
But I really believe that he thinks that's his Christian stewardship, to use his gifts to further God's kingdom.
He continues to do what he does because it allows other people the opportunity to flourish and grow and develop.
I just think he has something to offer, and Milt is willing to offer what he has. And that's right, and that's good.
He's given me a lot of knowledge I would not have gotten probably from someone else. That's the type of person that my dad, Milt Kuyers, is, that he gives his knowledge to people.
Milt is not one who believes in retirement. So he is going to give his all the time and not let up.
I can never imagine my father retiring. I really do believe he feels it's his lot in life, his God-given gift, to continue as long as he can.
And because of his deep sense of faith and his understanding of business as a calling, he desires to live each and every day fully as a servant and as a steward, and we give thanks for that fullness, that generosity, that flourishing of life that we see with Milt.
Well, thanks for eavesdropping on our conversation here. It's great to have you here, Milt. It is inspiring. It's been inspiring for me to be a leader at Calvin and to know you. You were he was one of the first people that I got to know from Calvin, and that relationship has been a vital source of wisdom and encouragement the whole time that I've served in this role. But let's go to something a little lighter to start out with. People could see from the video that you're a runner. And Milt and I, actually, last time I visited you this summer, we went running together. And so Milt's been running longer than I've been alive, I think. But tell us a little bit about what motivated you to start running and how that discipline's influenced your life.
Okay. I thought as we watched the video that was probably enough for today. And without having to go into details of parts of my life. And I'm going to say this, not first of all to answer what the President asked me, but my story will be God's work in my life. As most of you can testify, my story includes tough times and also amazing blessings. I grew up in Jenison. I'm the son of a very hard-working blue-collar worker who had an 8th grade education. And during high school, I worked at a fresh produce market convenience store, which was open until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, because at that time the supermarkets closed at 6 o'clock. Was next to Rainbow Grill in Granville, Michigan. And I often ran home after work to Jenison in the dark, about 3 miles a night. And so that's when I started my running. In this job, I learned how to serve and relate with people and became interested in pursuing business as a vocation because of the job that I held in this fresh produce convenience store market.
That's great. That's a great story. As we develop our students and we help them to understand this concept of vocation, one of the things we help them to try to understand too is the job that they might envision for themselves when they graduate from Calvin isn't necessarily indicative of the job that they're going to have for the rest of their life. And your story is similar in that regard. You began a professional career in public accounting, and you were well on your way to becoming a partner, and then left to become a CFO for someone else. So talk about that transition and what prompted you to rethink what were your initial steps in your career, in your vocation.
In 1958, after graduating with an MBA from the University of Michigan, I began my career actually at age 21. I was 21 when I received my MBA from University of Michigan. I began my career in Milwaukee with a firm now known as Deloitte. I worked on both the consulting and the audit side of Deloitte. It was the beginning of non-accounting consulting by major CPA firms. I traveled extensively at that time and often worked 70-plus hours a week. I would wave goodbye to my family on Sunday night, and I would come back into town often late on Friday night, sometimes on Saturday morning. After 7 years, I was 2 years away from a promised partnership in the firm. And I began to be concerned that my life would not change when I became a partner. My wife, Carol, was really concerned about balance in my life. And I kept telling her that we were doing really well. And what I was really saying is we're doing really well financially. And I finally started doing some serious soul searching at that time. I was not spending enough time with my family and spending almost no personal time with my God. Just at that time, I received a call from a partner in Foley & Lardner, which was the largest law firm in Milwaukee, about 500, 600 attorneys. I had worked on a consulting project for an organization he was involved with. He also was on the board of a company looking for a CFO. I looked at the CFO opportunity. I accepted the job. People in the firm at that time thought I was foolish. I took a 40% cut in pay, and it was one of the best moves that I ever made in my life. Quickly achieved the balance in my life between God and family and work that we needed as a family.
It's really it's a very good lesson probably to all of us that these things, time passes quickly and you can find yourself in a pattern and a set of practices and behaviors that aren't what you're called to be doing. But you served this business for 19 years and began to pursue entrepreneurial investments on the side before striking out on your own. So tell us about the work you were doing and what your life was like during this time.
Okay, I took a job with the name of a company called Sterling Incorporated, which was a family-owned business. I took the job as CFO. I stayed from 1965 to 1984 as CFO, and also became president of 2 of the acquired subsidiaries during that time. I was allowed to purchase a small interest in this company, and I borrowed the entire investment. When I think of the amount that I borrowed at that time, I can hardly conceive that I would have dared to do that. Sterling was a manufacturer of capital equipment for the plastics industry, which included temperature control systems, grinders, robots, pick-and-place units, electronics, and hydraulic presses. During that time, I learned all phases of operating a manufacturing business, especially operations from a systems approach. I also honed my ability to relate to, be compassionate about, listen to, and encourage employees. At that time, I built an office in our basement, and I always ate with my family, and oftentimes at night I would go down to my office and leave the door open for anyone from my family to interrupt. Carol would come down to my office in the basement after the children were in bed to read across the desk from me as I worked. Carol has been a huge support for me as a praying wife, and also as a person who has always been content, and as a partner in pushing increased stewardship giving as God has blessed us. During this time, on the side, I began to become an entrepreneur. I made a first acquisition with a partner who knew the office products industry. My partner had served as sales manager within the state of Wisconsin for a very large office product wholesaler. We scraped together, and you won't believe this number, $6,000 for our equity investment in a company called H.H. West, which was a business which had started in 1847 and in some ways still looked like it was operating in 1847. It had one store in downtown Milwaukee. And when we did that, we observed an industry with a lot of mom and pop owners who were getting older in the state of Wisconsin. We went through 21 acquisitions. My partner was the operating manager. I was the architect of the acquisitions while I was still holding the other job. We grew sales, both internally and through acquisitions, from $500,000 a year to nearly $70 million. In the 23 years from 1972 to 1995, when we sold that company, we were able to finance all of those acquisitions through a combination of seller financing and straight bank loans. And most of these opportunities came to us because of our reputation for treating sellers fairly. On my own, in 1984, finally, I decided that I wanted to do for myself what I was doing for the family business that I worked for. My goal at that time was to find one small manufacturing company which I could hopefully buy, hopefully grow, and then hopefully make more profitable, and then live happily ever after. Didn't quite work that way. While looking for this opportunity in order to put food on the table and not eat the capital that I had put aside from selling my minority interest in Sterling, I began in a consulting role as president of a manufacturer of fire protection equipment, which was in major financial distress and required a major turnaround. We turned this company around in 6 weeks through effective listening sessions. Let me emphasize that. Effective listening sessions. 1 year later, while still looking for the ideal business opportunity to buy, I took the job as the COO and Executive Vice President of the holding company that owned Star Sprinkler, named Grucon Corporation, which had major construction company and hotel interests in addition to Star Sprinkler. It also required a major turnaround at that time in its history. This company had a sales volume of $1 billion at the time that I came there as Chief Operating Officer. In these turnaround settings, I really learned listening skills. Employees in these type companies often know what needs to be done to change. You just have to be a facilitator to listen and then act and give credit to everyone who has given suggestions. Also, at the same time, I caught the attention of the chairman of the largest bank in Milwaukee because of the turnaround work that was successful. This was extremely important in the financing of the acquisitions of companies that occurred later on. Finally, with a partner beginning in 1986, which was a former Deloitte consultant with whom I had worked 20 plus years before, began to acquire companies. Ultimately, this partner and I acquired 9 manufacturing companies in the 7 years between 1986 and 1993, and we have since sold 8 of them. And I'm going to give you just a quick description of those companies. The first company that we acquired was a distributor of shipping and packaging supplies and also had a custom box board plant. Second company we were involved with as lead investors was a company called Medical Advances. Medical Advances was a designer and manufacturer of special MRI receiving coils, which was a patented device that we had acquired for royalty payments to the medical college in Wisconsin. Third company, actually in 1986, was a company called Zero Zone Refrigeration. We were manufacturers of upright glass door freezers and refrigerators for supermarkets. And Walmart, in a couple years, became 65% of our business because the first year we picked up 1/3 of its business. It's when they were expanding all over the country of their superstores. And the second year we got half of their business, and the third year we had 100% of their business. And it became a major concern because of concentration. And we had a big problem later on, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Fourth company was a company called Grayline Incorporated. We were plastic extruders, insulating plastic extruded tubing, and we added a new technology for expansion of PVC tubing as a major growth opportunity. The fifth company with this partner was a company called Northwest Coatings. We were a chemical engineering company. We started with formulating water-soluble adhesives and coatings, and then we added UV curable, and we also added electron beam curable adhesives and coatings to our product offerings. And then we acquired a company called Desert Air. It was a very large company that manufactured very large dehumidification systems. These were the size of semi-trailers, and we also at that time developed a small product for April Air, whose ads you hear all the time for small dehumidifiers. We basically built and manufactured and designed their dehumidifiers. And then the seventh company was a company called Fostel, which I still have today, and that's where I office. We are manufacturers and designers and engineers of very large coating and laminating systems. And we established an assembly plant in China about 10 years ago. The product that we produce could be 50 meters long with line speeds up to 3,000 feet per minute. And our drying technology included air dryers and also UV dryers and also electron beam technology. And then the eighth and ninth was a combination of two divisions that we acquired. We manufactured vacuum rolls and slot dies for the converting web technology industry. Our expertise was not technical. We believed that our approach to running a business started with respect and concern for the employees who were there when we made the acquisition. We listened and we responded to advice and suggestions. Also wanted all of our employees to be in the know through face-to-face contact. Remember, these were small companies. And added outstanding technical people to our employee ranks.
Amazing example of liberal arts education in action, don't you think? And this is one of the things that's is so impressive about Milt, is he's so intellectually curious about a wide range of things, able to engage a wide range of ideas, is analytically and clearly a hard-headed business person with a compassionate heart. And he's described to me a little bit on his journey, his story at this time, the situation his brother was going through. And I think that story helps to illustrate a little bit that Milt is not someone that's obsessed with the bottom line. Clearly you see how he cares deeply for people while he seeks to have business success and expand opportunity for people. But talk about how you turned to your family and your brother in his particular time of need.
Okay. My brother John, who was sitting here, and I had a younger brother who got into serious financial trouble as an entrepreneur at a very young age. Our dad had signed a guarantee for my brother, putting his home on the line, and my dad had didn't have much more than his home. Old Kent Bank here in Grand Rapids. Brother called me and asked for help because he was going to go bankrupt and they were going to pull the note, which would basically have taken my dad down too and his home. I came to Grand Rapids. I agreed to take over the loan. My brother divorced, remarried, and moved out of state and left me holding the bag. I was very angry that I had been stuck with my brother's problem, held that anger because he had put Carol and I into a huge financial stress for over 5 years. And then we came to the time that he was going to be 35, in April of 1978. For 3 days before his birthday in April, I could not sleep for 3 nights. God, in those 3 days, put in my heart the need to ask my brother for forgiveness for how I had felt about him. And I had looked at the ability that God gave us to be able to get through that financial crisis and recognize that everything that we have in terms of finances is God's, and we are allowed to manage it. And He allowed us to manage it, to take care of this difficulty. He put in my heart, God, in those 3 days, the need to ask for His forgiveness for how I had felt about him, and I called him on the evening of his birthday. I asked him for his forgiveness. He asked for my forgiveness. And we did a lot of crying together. We talked for about 2 hours. And the burden after that telephone call was lifted for how I had felt for the last 7 years. 3 weeks later, I received a call that my brother had died. I wouldn't be able to talk about that event today if it were not for what God pushed me to do. The Holy Spirit, people, is real.
Yeah, praise God. So, people who know and work with you say that you're a great listener. How have you developed and used that skill over time? clearly listening is one of the core strategies for your acquisition and business success and turnaround. How have you used that and developed that over time, including the example we have of listening to the Holy Spirit, which is pretty extraordinary?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit here about some other things that have impacted me. And this story actually started at a Christian business conference that I had been invited to attend along with 8 Christian businessmen for a special, very specific reason, to open our eyes to the very real needs in the inner city for meaningful employment, and then our mandate to respond actively as Christian business people to that need. I came back from that conference all fired up about what I thought I could do in making impact in the inner city of Milwaukee. Problems of unemployment, underemployment, and lack of appropriate opportunities. But God knew that I had a lot of learning to do before He was prepared to bless this activity. I tried very hard for 6 months to find an inner city ministry that I could work with in order to be able to take a look at this issue. I struck out with everyone I talked to because their interest was not in seeking another active business participant, but instead in seeking another passive contributor. Finally, one of the deacons in my church suggested that I should go see Pastor James Carrington, black pastor of Lighthouse Gospel Chapel located in the worst part of Milwaukee. I called Pastor Carrington for an appointment. He agreed to see me. My first meeting with him didn't go well. He told me that my ideas, although admirable, wouldn't work because he gave me 5 reasons why they wouldn't work. You probably came here, Mr. Kuyers, looking for cheap labor. Number 2, you don't really understand all the difficulties inner city people face. Number 3, you're doing this to get some media exposure for yourself. Successful white suburban businessman reaches down to help poor people who can't help themselves. How often don't we see those pictures in the paper? And he slammed his hand on his desk and he said, when you do that, you demean us. And then he said, I tried this once before, and a person who was a Christian hired somebody from my church, and it didn't work. And he said, you probably are planning to pursue a similar plan. And then he said, my people trust me, and I don't want to violate that trust by placing my trust in someone for their well-being whom I have no experience with, sent me on my way. I was not happy, and I was very discouraged. It took me 2 more calls to him to see him again, and he repeated what he told me the first time. And then I called him again a 3rd time, and he said, come again, I'll talk again. And this time he said, I think, Milt, called me Milt by that time, I think you're for real. And so I will call a meeting for next Thursday over lunch hour here in the church. On Sunday I will announce it and talk a little bit about your ideas. No guarantee that anybody will show up, although 25% unemployment rate in that church at that time. That Thursday, 19 people showed up, all needing work. And the people who sat around the table, the 19 people, all had the look of hope in their faces. I've learned through the years to read faces and eyes. And then I walked out saying to God, how am I going to follow through with my promise? Because I really had decided I was going to hire 1 and see once whether it worked, as he had indicated. Then a miracle happened. Our company's business increased so much in the next 2 weeks that I offered employment to all of these people. For the first 2 years of this program, we found employment for 35 people. Only 2 dropped out of the workforce when most of those people had held jobs, most of them for not longer than 6 weeks at a time. In 5 years, we got jobs for 100 people in this inner city church. So 100 families in that church were impacted through this program. Why did it succeed? God's blessing. Number 2, unique partnership between Pastor Carrington and myself. I believe it was his part of the partnership that made it work. He believes that it was my part of the partnership that made it work. What a phenomenal partnership that was. And then I also was involved in the beginning of Partners Worldwide. That's a story all by itself, but it opened up special rules for business people in God's kingdom. Through Partners, we have been affirmed in our vocations, our callings. Most of us in the outstanding Christian calling of business or farming. Secondly, we have found a place where we can use those gifts that we use or have used every day of our work lives to bring the cup of cold water in Christ's name. It might be financial support, it might be mentoring, it might be partnering around the globe for job creation activities. Thirdly, some of us may have found incredible purpose to life after reaching a mature age where our minds and our hands and our resources are used in exciting ways to extend God's kingdom. And then you ask about listening. I learned listening as a consultant. It worked, and it gave a feeling of dignity and respect to everyone you listen to. I've said often, I've learned to listen with my ears, I have learned to listen with my eyes, and most importantly, I have learned to listen with my heart. When in discussions with a potential seller of a business, I have always started with this question: Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, what would you like to have happen?
And you wait for the answer then. So, a lot of entrepreneurs sitting out there, probably some of them wondering, what does Milt Kuyers look for when he's evaluating a business, when he's thinking about buying and selling a business? So how would you, in a few minutes that we have, inform people of how to think about that?
Yeah. In buying a business, we always look for businesses that we can have an impact on, turnarounds often. We ask ourselves this question: can we add anything to this company? If we believe we can, we will pursue the opportunity. And we sell businesses when potential buyers approach us because they know our businesses, not the daily letters from brokers, or we make decisions to position a company for sale because of what's going on. I talked about Zero Zone, where Walmart applied pressure for price reductions. We had gone down to Bentonville, and they had given us a new case lineup that they wanted us to build, and we needed an 8% increase in order to be able to take the order. And so we proposed an 8% increase in our case lineups. And the buyer there said, no, you're going to have to reduce your price by 5% or you're going to lose all of our business. And we said, we can't do that. We had just built a huge addition to our plant to be able to take care of the 65% of Walmart's business. And he got up from the table and he said, okay, you've lost all the business. We aren't going to give it to you anymore if you don't reduce your price by 5%. Well, you can imagine what kind of a plane ride we had back from Bentonville to say, what in the world are we going to do? We've lost all of the business down to 35%. And so 3 weeks later, we got a call from them saying they would give us the 8% increase because apparently they decided they couldn't get it from somebody else that quick. And that's when we positioned that company to sell it. And then also Desert Air that I talked about, the dehumidification company. Desert Air became experts in addition to all the other dehumidification products that they built in dehumidifying grow rooms. Started with lettuce and tomatoes, and all of a sudden we became expert in grow rooms for marijuana. And my partner and I, my partner's Christian, we looked at each other and said, we want no part of having a legacy. It was a very profitable, and it was growing like crazy. That company was growing like this. We decided that we did not want a legacy for being responsible for a bunch of druggies in the future based on the fact that we provided technology that allowed them to be able to use that product. So
yeah, so good good insights into the evaluation of these questions. I think we've got time for probably about one more question. And so we've got a few that we've queued up here, but I want you to give you a chance to end where you would like. So I've got a question here about family and business and how well or not that works. Advice to give others on starting a business, or what keeps you working so hard? You can pick.
Well, I had a rule that I would not include my children in our family businesses because I had seen families destroy businesses, and worse than that, I had seen family businesses destroy families. And to make this short and answer here, a friend who's in this audience here counseled me to rethink that. And I have now been in business with 3 of my children or their spouses, one-on-one, not together. And it has worked really, really good. If somebody wants to buy a business, I'm going to just give one sentence. Live a lifestyle that allows you to be a good steward. If you want to buy a business, you want to look for a business, show stewardship as you're moving on down that line. And then finally, I have found real joy in my work in this inner city of Milwaukee and all around the world. I've also learned how to cry as the magnitude of problems of poverty, both in the inner city and in developing countries, has stood in front of me. And I talked about my work with Pastor Carrington was one of the most exciting times in my work life. And then in Kenya, too, at the beginning of Partners Worldwide. And right now, I continue to look for businesses to buy with younger Christians who have a goal to be a business owner and look for the opportunities to do that. We need major money makers in God's kingdom to support God's kingdom causes all over the world with their time, talents, and treasure. And my purpose for continuing to work even now at my age, create opportunities for Carol and I to give and to work in special parts of God's kingdom, hopefully to role model an approach to life that others might want to replicate and follow. God has helped Carol and I find joy in determining how we can look out for the interest of others before we look out for our own. My final comment, business is an outstanding Christian calling. Thanks for allowing me to talk.
Thank you.